Well, good morning, everyone. As you can see, we are here virtually in our homes, just staying safe in this season of life. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Morgan, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm here with my good friend Lauren, and we're just really grateful to be a part of this community here at Forefront, and we just want to welcome you in this morning. Listen, we are in our third week of our Advent series, and they asked me, what does this mean to me this time of year of Advent? And it's always changing for me. It's right now it's just a reminder of God's beauty, a reminder of God's grace, a reminder of God's wonder. And I hope that this can be a time that we can just fill ourselves up with these things, with this beauty, with this wonder. You're going to see in a little while us lighting a candle as a symbol of this Advent series and this time. So may this be a time for you, for your heart, for your mind. Maybe we can all just breathe deeply and just be here. We can invite God's presence in together.
Oh
May we never lose our wanted. Wide-eyed and mystified, may we be just like a child, staring at the beauty of our King.
Hi Forefront, my name is Emmy and this is my vocal looper. I love the Christmas season and I think there are a lot of reasons to be joyful right now, but I also feel stuck in this state of just like perpetual waiting where it's hope and then waiting and then hope and then waiting. And this is a song that I think really speaks to that. So here is O Come, Emmanuel. God, hear God with us. 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 Oh come, Emmanuel. God, hear God with us. And ransom that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears. Oh, come thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night and death's dark shadows put to light. Rejoice, 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 Israel. Oh, come thou wisdom from on high, and order all things far and nigh. To us the path of knowledge shows, and cause us in her ways to rejoice, 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 rejoice.
With this Christmas wishes missed, the point I could convey. If only I could find the words to say to let you know how much you've touched my life, because here is where you're finding me.
exact same place as on New Year's Eve, and from a lack of my persistency, we're less than half as close as I wanna be. And the first time that you opened your eyes, did you realize that you would be my savior? And the first breath that left your lips, did you know that it would change this world forever? And the first time that you opened your eyes, did you realize that you would be my savior? And the first breath that left your lips, did you know that it would change this world forever? And so this Christmas I'll compare the things I felt in prior years to what this midnight made so clear, that you have come to meet me here. To look back and think that this baby would one day save me, and the hope that what you did, that you were born so I might truly live. To look back and think that this baby would one day save me. And the first time that you opened your eyes, did you realize that you would be my savior? And the first breath that left your lips, did you know that it would change this world forever? And the first time that you opened your eyes, did you realize that you would be my savior? And the first breath that left your lips, did you know that it would change this world forever? And I celebrate the day that you were born to die, so I could one day pray for you to save my life. Pray for you to save my life. Pray for you to save my life.
Good morning, Forefront. My name is Mackenzie, or Mac, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm on staff here at Forefront, coming to you live from my living room. And I have the meet and greet question for you this morning. The question is, what is an unexpected friendship you now have thanks to Forefront? Oh, and live stream comment guide people, this is different from what's in there. We just changed it. And my answer to this question, I could go on forever and ever. But the thing that comes to mind is I went to college for musical theater and moved to New York with, you know, stars in my eyes, Broadway dreams, and pretty much everyone I knew had the same dreams as me. And since coming to Forefront, I've met people from all walks of life, all professions that I probably otherwise wouldn't have met. And it's added so much more color to my life. I know a pilot, nurses, lawyers, so many things, and we still find a way to be friends and have community together. And also, Sammy Main, shout out to you for recommending my roommate, Sarah. We moved in together during the pandemic, and I would have never met her otherwise. Drop in the comments your unexpected friendships from Forefront. And now I'm back with our announcements. Our first announcement, if you've been with us for the past couple weeks, you've probably guessed it, our Make a Joyful Noise fundraiser. We are doing a giving campaign right now called Make a Joyful Noise, and this includes our partnership with Ruth's Refuge. So we are trying to raise $40,000 right now And this fundraiser, this end of year gift that you will hopefully be able to give to Forefront, will be going to so many things, helping us with live streaming to your homes, be it here or at the roulette, depending on the COVID cases. It helps fund all of our equipment and so many things, but it also will be going, a portion of it will be going to Roost Refuge, our long-term partnership where we help fund and finance for refugees who are rehoming right now. We help furnish their homes with our partnership with Roost Refuge, and that's where your end of year gifts will be going. Speaking of Make a Joyful Noise, we have a gala this Thursday. It's going to be so awesome. Go to forefrontnyc.com/gala to RSVP so you don't forget. It's going to be this amazing concert. Our amazing worship team who you've been seeing represent today. We've got some highlights who are going to be singing for us this Thursday. It's going to be an awesome Christmas concert. And we have a really cool MC, Ben Jeffrey, who was in The Lion King on Broadway. So it's going to be super fun. And if that wasn't fun enough, an hour before the gala is the party experience. It's going to be a mixology class taught by my dear friend Joanna Carpenter, who is an amazing New York City mixologist. She created a very own drink just for Forefront called Santa's After Hours. It's going to be so good. With a $50 donation, you can participate in this class, forefrontnyc.com/party to RSVP. If you want to be in community with us before or after service, you can go to forefrontnyc.com/cafe for our Kinship Cafe. It's our new virtual lobby that we're trying out. We miss seeing your faces in the lobby, and we decided to try and create a virtual lobby on Zoom. So if you miss seeing people before and after service, go hop on over there. Also, I just want to let you all know that there will not be service on December 27th. Every year, Forefront takes off the service between Christmas and New Year's around that time so we can all have a week of rest before the new year. And last but not least, we want to give a huge congratulations to Ben and Sierra who got married. Congratulations, Ben and Sierra. Your pictures are beautiful. We're so, so happy for you, and we're so happy to have you a part of our community. So now we are going into a time of liturgy. I invite you to drop your prayer requests, your praises, anything that you'd like us to pray for together as a community in the comments, no matter where you're viewing. And in about a minute, I'll circle back and read some of them aloud.
Everybody's moving. Everyone is going somewhere. With everything they're trying just to make it to a place where I am not there. Just wait on me. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Just trust and know that I am God. I'm in control. I am still God.
We are praying for Juby's family. Her uncle passed away last night. I'm so sorry to hear that, Juby. We're definitely praying. We're praying for Dev's friends, Brenda and Leslie, who've been hit again and again with struggle and tragedy this year. We're praying for Stacey Davis for guidance as they make life changes. We're praying for the mental health and educational health for all the children who have been disrupted during this time. Absolutely, Jen. Jordan, we're praying for your roommate and her family who lost both of their grandparents in a week, within a week of each other. That is so painful. We're definitely praying. Sammy, we're praying for students at all education levels dealing with exams on top of pandemic stress and uncertainty of what's to come. Praying for Dev's friend S, who is struggling with depression. Absolutely. We're praying for everyone who's struggling with depression and anxiety. It's only heightened during this time. Jim, waiting to hear about the results of an MRI from my cousin. Please also pray for my dad, who is still in the hospital with COVID, so we can't see him. We're definitely praying for you, Jim, and for your dad and for your cousin. We're praying for our government during this transition. Andy on YouTube, a prayer of gratitude for my friend Sue, who is now breathing on her own after being on a ventilator with COVID. Oh, we are so thankful to hear that. Definitely a praise, Andy. That's amazing. Liz, praying that the cancer has not reoccurred, going to see the doctor tomorrow to check. Liz, we're definitely praying for you, and let us know if you need anything at all. Jess Jones on YouTube, moving across the country this week. Prayers that goes well and I'm able to stay safe. We're definitely praying for you, Jess, and praying for everyone who's moving during this time. Allison on Facebook, prayers for Alan and his family. His grandmother passed away 2 weeks ago, and we so wish we could be there with them right now. Oh, Allison and Alan, we're definitely praying for that and know the pain of needing to be away from family during a grieving process. That is very painful. Renee on Facebook, praying for my friend Whitney, who is struggling mentally. Sarah on Facebook, Andrew's family, his uncle passed away from a heart attack. Praying for Brandon Bernard and his family. Praying for Jordan's uncle, who was diagnosed with leukemia, and his wife, Jordan's aunt, who just recovered from breast cancer. Praying for everyone who's traveling or not traveling this season. And there's so many more coming in. We're praying for all of these. I'm seeing the comments flooded. We're praying for all of these, and we'll continue to read them as they come in and after. We believe in the God of love, who calls us to reject all idols and who seeks a deep communion with us. We believe in the God who is not remote, but who is immersed in the life of this world, sharing its hope, taking our pain, and offering joy. We believe in the God who identifies with the poor and the oppressed and those who long for faith and who calls us to stand with them. We believe in the God whose love is vulnerable, whose name is love, and whose covenant with all people is unshakable. Amen.
Hey, good morning, Forefront. I'm coming to you from a very awkward place in my apartment, but very happy to be here with all of you safely, and hope you're all doing all right. I'm the executive director here at Forefront New York City. All pronouns are okay with me. And we are in the middle of our Advent, which is a season essentially of preparation for the birth of Jesus, the coming of the Messiah, what have you. And as you can probably tell, we're also, our particular sermon series is called Make a Joyful Noise, in which we're sort of joyfully and noisily and messily celebrating our community, the good news, who Jesus is, our scriptures, and what have you. So we are kicking off within this series our announcement of our sort of new, but it's kind of old, but somewhat new, core values as a church. So I'm going to talk about the first one, and then Jonathan will cover the next two. And the first one is going to be about kind of the community and our life of our church, and I'll kind of walk you through our process. So as Jonathan mentioned last week, a few months ago, we took a staff retreat in Pennsylvania, and we kind of had this big white poster paper, and we wrote down all the things that we kind of felt were important to our church, that defined our church. And we had all these bullet points, and then we took those bullet points and then tried to condense them into categories. And so we had kind of 3 categories in which ended up being our 3 core values. And if you can see, we'll have a slide, but there's a category called community/life. And underneath we have these bullet points. I mean, it's my handwriting, so it's very messy. I couldn't read some of the words, but you see the bullet points that said like chosen family, mutual aid, unity, not uniformity, etc. And I want to explain a little bit about our thinking behind those bullet points, and I'll talk a bit about what we ended up naming this value. So under like unity and not uniformity, which is kind of a big one of our kind of taglines, so to speak, we were thinking about how we have people in our church who, sorry, that's my cat. People in our church who do not believe in God, maybe kind of consider themselves Christian, not even sometimes, all the way ranging from people who definitely consider themselves Christian, pray daily, read the Bible daily. And what I think I love about our church is you'll find both groups of people among our committed volunteers, among our leadership. An anecdote I always like to tell is in my small group, at one point we kind of rotated leading prayer and stuff like that. And then someone had to lead prayer who is very uncomfortable with prayer, does not believe in intercessory or interventionist God. And so she kind of just read out loud a written prayer. And then we also had someone in our group who grew up in a Korean church, and so made us all pray out loud for 5 minutes all at once straight, which is very stressful, but also kind of fun. And it kind of like you got into it after a little bit. I haven't done that since childhood. So you kind of, and both of those people are, leading in our group, helping facilitate and what have you. And that's because we find ways we can be unified without being uniform on all areas of doctrine and what have you. And so under the bullet point chosen family, for instance, and I got Mac's permission to share this, she's also in my small group. And during the pandemic, she was living at home with her family because, life. She's back in Brooklyn now, but during that time, she texted our group and said, it's coming up to my 1-year anniversary of when I came out to, myself essentially, and then other people, what have you. And so we said, Mac's parents aren't the most supportive, so that we'll celebrate with you and for you, because there's no one physically present with you now to celebrate with you. And so we went around and we all said something we're proud of her about, something in which we're inspired by her, because we wanted to be able to stand in essentially and do what, ideally sometimes our families would do for us. And under the bullet point mutual aid, so I'm just like hitting everyone with all these snapshots. I'll bring it together at some point. I think this is probably the most obvious bullet point. If you've been with us, especially during the summer, you'll notice, all our sort of mutual aid efforts, which are still going on and still running. And I think I've been particularly impressed by how many of you, when we put out the call to help, stood up and said, I have a little bit extra time. I'm going to go pick up groceries for someone. Or I have a little bit of extra money. I'm going to cover groceries for someone. Some of you lent cars and drove people places, people you have never met before. You got in the same car with them. You delivered groceries to basically complete strangers, just simply because we're part of the same church. You're a good human being. We're in crisis, what have you. And so we thought a little bit about, what do we call this kind of commitment that is kind of like family, sometimes better than family, but also is not family, because we're all very much biologically unrelated to each other in many ways, and quite different. And I think Jonathan then came up with the word kinship. And we're like, oh, that's great. It just needs an adjective. So I was like, how about weird kinship or strange kinship? And everyone was silent. And I don't know why. And then someone finally pulled out the thesaurus and was like, how about uncommon kinship? And we was like, yes, that's it. And we all spontaneously jumped in the air and we took this picture, which is awesome. And, as a kind of aside, by the way, this is a fundraising sermon series, so I'm going to be asking for money and what have you throughout the sermon. And one of the line items in our budget is to be able to have staff retreats, so we can think about the long-term future of our church, our core values, make sure those values are infused into our ministries. And also, if we raise enough money, we hope to be able to have bring back church-wide retreats again when it's safe, when the vaccine is out. So that's something where I think we're like hoping to be able to do with some of the money we raise. But in any case, to return to this value of uncommon kinship, what makes kinship uncommon? There are many angles and facets to this, but I think the primary one I want to highlight is that common kinship or common community is one in which naturally the people in the center are the people who are the most taken care of, because they have the most friendships, the most relationships, they're popular, whatever, they have resources, they're in the in-group. I think uncommon kinship are forms of kinship or community in which those who are not in the center are taken care of as well. And I think that's what we aspire to do at Forefront. We don't always achieve that. And I want to talk a little bit about why we care about those through, yes, the Bible. So in John 13, I'm going to kind of jump straight there. This is kind of one of the verses, these chapters in which Jesus is at the Last Supper. He just washed his disciples' feet. He knows he's going to get betrayed in a little bit and, get ambushed by the police and sentenced to death as a criminal. And so he's trying to impart to his disciples some final words of wisdom that they can really hang on to when he is gone for, surprise 3 days. And so one of the things he says to them is, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. I want to pay attention to the last sentence in particular, because I think it's super interesting that from Jesus' perspective, what makes his disciples distinctive or perhaps uncommon from other people's disciples, other leaders' disciples, is not the fact that they have certain beliefs, that they believe in Jesus, something like that, but that they have love for one another. Not necessarily love for God, what have you, although all those things are definitely important. But this is going back to what makes his disciples uncommon. And so let's talk about the disciples. And I'm not going to talk about the disciples in the center, sort of, Peter, James, and John, and Matthew, and Luke, what have you. I'm going to talk about the shadow disciples. The disciples who were afraid of being publicly associated with Jesus, who literally hung out at night because they didn't want people to see that they were talking to Jesus. And I'm thinking of two people in particular, Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. So we learn about Nicodemus immediately in the second chapter of John, and that's the gospel I'm spending the most time with. Here's a verse. Now there was a Pharisee named Nicodemus, a leader of the Jews. He came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God. So I can't get into this whole story, but you can tell really important fact that Nicodemus came to Jesus by night. And what does that mean? Where do people go if they're going to someplace at night? Nicodemus does not want to be seen. Maybe he uses the cover of night to kind of ask his questions, to secretly confess his faith, and what have you. The other man I mentioned was Joseph of Arimathea. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but whatever. I'll get into his story a little bit more, but we know three things from the various Gospels. We know that he's a rich man in the Gospel of Matthew. We know that he is a respected member of the council, Gospel of Luke. And we know later on, as you'll see, he was someone who was a secret follower of Jesus because he feared his community's opinion. So the question is, what are Joseph and Nicodemus afraid of? And I think some of the things you can kind of guess. They have a lot of power. They don't lose that power. But I don't think we sort of grasp in a Christian majority nation how socially dangerous it was to associate with Jesus back then. And I think the example I like to think of the most that really brings us home is in John chapter 9. So what happens is Jesus heals this man who was born blind. He restores his eyesight through some mud, saliva combo. I'm trying to imagine these days that combination will get sold on Etsy or something like that. But the Pharisees and the religious leaders and people are shocked, how this man, isn't he born blind, what have you? And the religious authorities in particular are in disbelief because they say Jesus is a sinner. How can then Jesus work a miracle? So they bring this man before his parents or something like that. And they ask his parents, hey, isn't this your son? Was he born blind? And if so, how is he now seeing? And his parents, the scripture tells us, are afraid. They're afraid because anyone who testifies that Jesus is the Messiah is at risk of getting kicked out of their synagogues, of their communities, of their jobs, workplaces, what have you. And so this is what the parents say. We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. And I kind of love this verse because it's so clear these dude's parents are like scared out of their minds. They're just throwing their son under the bus and saying like, so glad you're no longer blind, but like you're on your own. We're not like risking our lives for you. We're not getting thrown out of communities. Like you talk to them. We're not talking to them. You handle it. So you can see how associating with Jesus was so scary that even parents were not willing to take a risk on behalf of their children. So do we see how we can have a little bit more empathy for where Nicodemus and Joseph are coming from? Yes, of course, they're privileged, or have you. But you can understand why they have this secret relationship with Jesus and why they meet, in disguise, essentially. They like his teachings. They're breaking bread. They're drinking wine with all the other social outcasts, so to speak. But they don't want to give up anything too much, really. And so they're in this paradoxical situation where they're in the center of Jewish society, but on the margins of Jesus' circle. So this continues for a while. They meet at night, or what have you. And then Jesus, surprise, is killed and executed. And so the question is, what's going on with his disciples? I know this is not super thematic relevant. This is more like relevant at Lent, but the story is so interesting. I had to talk about it during Advent. So the disciples, so I'm going to apply something called the Ignatian spiritual exercises, which are from St. Ignatius, in which you kind of take a passage of scripture and you sort of set the scene in your head. I think actors must do this a little bit, kind of create the backstories of characters. You kind of imagine what did it smell like, what was going on through their minds. The scripture only gives us sometimes like a few lines. So I'm going to do that. And this is not, an acting technique. This is like a centuries old spiritual exercise, but, actors also use. Mackenzie's like laughing at me, and I'm glad to have some audience validation. So I'm going to imagine what it's like for the disciples while Jesus is hanging on the cross and, dead. So, I'm thinking they're probably all huddled in one house here because they're scared. If they took Jesus down, maybe they're next. They're maybe feeling a little bit of, obviously, fear. I would also venture to say they're feeling a little bit guilt. I mean, not just Nicodemus and Joseph, but I think like everyone, most of them abandoned him as soon as the police came around to ambush him. So my foot's falling asleep, gotta readjust my leg. And Simon Peter, who supposedly was like Jesus' ride or die, denied being a disciple of Jesus in front of a Roman soldier 3 times. So I think everyone's feeling really guilty. And they're thinking, we have failed the person we love. We have failed our master, our teacher, our rabbi. And maybe, they're also grieving together. They're holding hands. They're praying together. They're singing together. They're breaking bread and eating together. And obviously, the loss of Jesus, but I also think the loss of Judas, who was one of them who took his life. I think that there's probably a lot of grieving going on then. And I kind of imagine Nicodemus and Joseph are there with them. They're, holding hands with people they would maybe otherwise never associate with, like illiterate fishermen, a skeezy tax collector, women, essentially like social outcasts who misfits because of Jesus. I venture to call it an uncommon kinship, drum roll. So at some point, I think someone asked in this room, what's going to happen to Jesus' body? Like, who's going to bury him? And in my head, I'm imagining Nicodemus and Joseph look at each other, make eye contact across the room. They're like, it's time. So I think they stand up and they make a speech and they say, you know what? We have the most power and resources on everyone in church. We'll take that risk. We'll come out. We'll claim his body because we owe it to you all. We've been in secret, hiding all this time. But this is time in which we can actually use our power for something. So let's read this passage. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices and linen clothes, according to the burial customs of the Jews. John 19. I find this passage incredibly moving and beautiful. These are two men who have been living a double life for years, and finally, after the death of Jesus, they come out and reveal themselves to be his disciples. And, can you imagine the gossip? They're here, they are taking care of Jesus' body, wrapping it, embalming it, burying it. And I'm sure they were probably filled with guilt and regret that they did this so late, that they felt like they owed Jesus one. But I also think that they were moved by their fellow disciples, and they felt maybe they owed it to them and not just owe it to Jesus. And I think something I think about is, I wonder if Joseph and Nicodemus encountered a community that made it worth it for them to give up their comfort and to take a risk. Worth it because they knew that if they got kicked out of their communities, which they probably would have after this kind of public coming out, that there would be a community that would take them in. And that, I think, is an uncommon kinship, a kind of community that you would take a risk for, a community that you would give up something comfortable for. Yes. That's a Jesus figurine that I got from Cebu in the Philippines with John Rosello. I can tell the backstory on the comments some other time. In any case, so the question is, this is highly too distracted in this sermon. So the question is, what kind of community do we aspire to have in this church? And I think this is a good question to ask, because if I'm asking you to give, you got to know kind of what you're giving to, what is the direction this church is moving towards. Do you agree with that direction, what have you? And I think it's fundamentally, our aspiration is to be a community that takes care of people who are not in the center. And so what does that look like? And I think we've done that in fits and starts, bits and pieces there, although there's so much more we can do. During this pandemic in particular, we've had a couple people reach out to staff who are not part of any group, any team, any small group, who don't really know a ton of people in this church, really just know Jonathan. And they reached out and said, hey, we need help. We're going through some stuff. And I was just kind of blown away to see our care team, which kind of formed during this pandemic, get on the phone with these congregants, talk to them. A spreadsheet would appear miraculously. A meal train would get formed miraculously, all for people whom they had never met before. I think also of a congregant who we had pass away a few months ago. And it was a very dear person to all of us. And his family actually used to attend our church, but now actually attends a different church. But I think all I was really proud of was that our response to them was pretty much the same way we respond to any family who is still a part of our church. We brought it together a meal train for them, with people chipping in all the way from London. We put together an emergency memorial service because we said, you are still kin to us. And I think that's a pretty uncommon thing for churches to do, which, for better or for worse. And I think another way in which I like to think about uncommon kinship is about, I think, as people mentioned, as we kind of alluded to in the meet and greet question, getting to know people who you otherwise would never have met if they weren't for a church. I noticed a lot of people in the comments mentioned Phil as their sort of uncommon friendship. And I'm actually going to give him a shout out in the sermon. I first met Phil through prayer, because, you go up during communion in the roulette and they would turn to the side. And I was like, who's this old white man who's always there praying for people? To be frank, that was my reaction. But then I got to know Phil a little bit better, and I was like, oh wow, this has a lot of kind of wisdom, a lot of gentleness. And it turns out we have really, really similar reasons for why we love Forefront. I'm going to read out something from him. Forefront was a revelation and permission to feel what I felt for a long, long time. I was already moving in a more progressive direction, but I felt pretty alone. It made me realize that it was okay to believe and think the way I do. The freedom to think for yourself, most churches don't talk about that. I was able to get involved and feel valued and appreciated to become a spiritual home, which I never had before. And that is pretty much exactly, I think, the biggest thing that Forefront has given me. I've talked in the past about like being able to kind of integrate my sexuality and my faith and my queerness. But actually the thing that I'm most grateful for is the ability to feel like I can use my brain in church. I felt like I was restored a part of my body, a part of myself. For the first time, I think at Forefront, I felt like my whole self was able to engage in my faith. That there was no like taboo question or secret red line I couldn't cross. And so I super resonate with what you wrote, Phil. We're actually going to post a bit of your story on social media. But what's interesting is that Phil and I, although we have really similar reasons for liking Forefront, have also super different life stories. So here I'm going to read aloud from Phil again. I was a really rebellious teenager. Anyone can guess. But I ran into the Jesus movement back in 1972. And that's how I ended up in a charismatic Bible college in Florida. And I left the church and I stumbled into Wiccanism in Philly. Phil says you can maybe find footage of him talking about being a practicing Wiccan on local Philly cable news. And then I managed a restaurant that did really well for a summer, but that was in 2001. After 9/11 happened, I got depressed. I drank way too much. And out of desperation, I wandered into a church. I realized I needed a religion that was about love and not just about me. When I couldn't quit drinking, the pastor sent me to Brooklyn for teen challenge rehab. It worked, but it was very right-wing and very legalistic. After that, I went to Times Square Church. I worked in restaurants as a chef and manager. Phil's a chef, by the way. And then in the beginning of 2013, I couldn't work anymore because my back went out. I ended up in a shelter, homeless, and then found out I was eligible for Veteran Affairs, Care, and Housing, which was miraculous because I was trying to figure out how to get neck surgery on my spine while living in a shelter. This apartment, through the VA's office, was also 2 blocks from the VA hospital, and it's located in Gramercy, Manhattan. One Sunday, I was looking for a church, and I stumbled to Gramercy Theater, which is where I found Forefront Manhattan Church, which is actually our parent church. And through that, after that closed, I ended up in Forefront Brooklyn. And I think, as you can tell, Phil, and I have quite different life stories, but one thing I super appreciate is, despite all of this stuff, I'm able to, one, learn from his story and his life in ways that maybe I wouldn't have if I just written him off as kind of like an old white dude. But also we find so many ways to like connect. We have similar kind of questions about theology and progressive Christianity. We have similar contemplative practices. We talk about speaking in tongues. And I'm so glad I am in church where I can learn from someone like Phil. I'm going to tell a different story. This one's Natasha Smith, who leads our 35 and up group. And by the way, Phil is in the care team, he's in the biblical literacy group, he's in the Forefront Manhattan group, he does so much in our church. Natasha leads our 35 and up group. She's married to Mary, who's also one of our leaders in our church. And for a good period of time, Natasha, Mary, and I were all part of the same small group meeting at the Johnston house, for those of you who remember Hannah and Sam Johnston. And we would meet, and I was at the point in time where I was really fresh from having come out to my parents. I definitely been trying to figure out questions, and I was like, how do I deal with rejection and set boundaries? And it was so helpful to have Natasha in that group in particular, who was basically a full life stage ahead of me and has so much more wisdom to share, and just hear her stories about her navigating things with her mom and her dad, and how with her siblings, and how she set boundaries, and how she decided to take things this way and that. And I think, side note, part of what we're raising money for is to be able to give a bigger budget to small groups so that we can really encourage and empower them to really sort of have these kinds of life-changing conversations. And I bring on Tasha in part because I think as queer people, sometimes the scariest people to meet at church are people who remind us of our families, because, it's like, oh, it brings up this trauma. They remind me of my aunt, my uncle, grandparents, what have you, parents. And so I want to read out this comment from Natasha, who posted this in the Facebook group. I have been so skeptical of befriending people who remind me of my extended family. I've been ridiculed by so many and shunned by others. The first time I heard Angela sing a song from my childhood, I burst into tears. I was worried that she would judge me too. She did not, and I'm always comforted when I talk to her. She also feels the hope that one day I might have a more meaningful relationship with other members of my family. I think this too is an uncommon kinship. Another example, when our country was grappling and still is grappling with the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and police violence against particularly Black folks in our country, our church had over the summer a series of very intense conversations, voluntary. I think we were about 50 people regularly engaged every week for about 6 weeks. And I, saw and observed white people who looked quite uncomfortable, but who committed to listening to the conversation, committed to giving up airtime so they could hear other perspectives. And I watched our Black congregants, other people of color, speak up and talk about ways in which they felt unwelcomed for in this church, not greeted at the front doors, talked down to while volunteering. And I watched them take a risk and say, I'm saying this, I'm being a bit vulnerable and sharing how I've been hurt because I believe in this church. I'm taking a risk to continue to commit to this church because I believe we can do better. I believe we're all one church as a family. And, I was struck by this. And as staff, I think speaking for myself, I learned a lot. We were able to listen and get feedback in ways in which, we were maybe rushing too much. I was being too impatient, too quick to action. It was a great learning experience for me. And I think that is a kind of uncommon kinship where we can share hard truths with each other. We can listen, we can be uncomfortable. And I think part of what we want to raise money for in this series is to actually hire and pay for an anti-racism facilitator to lead trainings for our board, our staff, our deacons, and so that to get trained so we can train other people in our church. And I think what kind of wraps all of this up for me is that I think the reason why we strive to take care of each other and learn from each other, including people who are not in the center, is that I think most of us know what it's like to not be in the center, whether it's because of our identity or because we ask too many questions in Sunday school or what have you. And I think as Christians, often we have to acknowledge we hold an incredible amount of privilege. But as progressive Christians, we are sort of social outcasts within the larger church community. And I think that is partly why I think all of us are kind of invested in disrupting the center, so to speak. And in particular, I want to shout out our decolonizing group, which is our group I feel does this as better than many groups I know, led by Ali and Juan. And even last Sunday, they had a whole conversation about the complicity of the church in white supremacy and how progress requires dismantling the church as an institution as we know it in order to build again. And I was listening to the conversation and just struck by the fact that we're having this conversation in church. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool that we are able to organize spaces for self-critique, essentially, as well as larger institutional critique. And Regina Miranda, who co-leads our Crown Heights North Small Group with her husband, Tom Barrera, mentioned this comment that I got her permission to share because I think it really encapsulates the mindset I hope we all have as a church. Despite allowing to feel included, I start to feel uncomfortable when I become too much a part of the inside because it means that I might lose touch with people who are on the margins. And I actually really, really love this because I think it's a super uncommon way of thinking about community and kinship. Instead of just thinking about, do I belong? Am I part of this? Am I in the middle? I think it's a mindset that asks, who does not belong? Who does not seem that they fit? And how can I connect with them? How can I make sure that I am in community with them? And I think if we all embody that mindset, that kind of attitude, something miraculous happens. The center disappears. Because there is no center, no in or out group anymore, the exclusive inner circle. And I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, in conclusion, as I mentioned, this is a giving message. If you're able, this is why I'm asking you to give, because we are a church that aspires towards an uncommon kinship, where we take care and look out for each other, regardless if you're in the center or the periphery, where we're invested in trying to always disrupt the center, where even when we fail, because definitely I would say if you feel I don't feel this love, joy, inclusion thing that you're feeling here, I still feel on the margins, like, yes, that our church is not perfect. We fail, we make mistakes, but at the same time, I think why I still love our church is that we're willing to listen and learn from our mistakes. So look, if you are hurting financially for whatever reason, you've lost income, costs have really risen for you, let us help you. This giving message is the reverse for you. But if your income is stayed kind of stable, maybe you've actually saved a little bit more money this season, I'm asking you to give in a way that takes risk, to give in a way that gives up a little bit of your comfort. And because I think we are building something kind of special and uncommon here. I want to acknowledge that I'm asking you to give to organized religion. And I know that's not super popular these days. I didn't think actually I'd ever be a point where I'm giving a fundraising message for a church, but here I am in my career. I get all the critiques of organized religion, but I just want to ask a few questions. Do y'all think that people just have hours of intense conversation on race without hours of pre-planning and facilitation beforehand? Do you think people that meal trains just spring up for someone who people have never met before without spreadsheets, without tons of behind the scenes administrative work? Do you think that Angela just kind of gets up and just sings a song spontaneously without labor, without preparation? I think all these things require organizing. They require organization. They require labor and what have you. And I think the infrastructure of a church is uniquely able to kind of support that and equip that in a way that just individual, spontaneous piety or spirituality can never quite amount to that, even though it's really good at other things. And so this is, to my mind, the kind of organized religion, I guess I had my slight New York accent come on, organized religion that I can get behind, and religion that organizes people for good. So would you give towards that? Would you pray with me for that? And would you allow me to thank you for the honor of being part of a church that does this? Close us in prayer. God, I thank you for this uncommon kinship which you modeled for us with your disciples and with the ways in which you love them, the ways in which you love people who would hurt you, who would fail you, who would betray you. And I thank you that in our church, even though we make mistakes, even though we have excluded people, we have made people feel unwelcome, we're always striving to do better, to learn, to get back up, to care for people, to push ourselves, to connect and care for people who, we might dislike, or we might have nothing in common with, or we might have never met. I pray that your spirit will cover over all sins. Your spirit of love will cover over all hurts and grievances as we strive together to form a truly uncommon kinship. In your name I pray. Amen.
Hi, Forefront. My name is Kayla, and my pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Gabby, my pronouns are she, her.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about why we give. So Gabby and I have been going to Forefront for a little over a year now. And it started because when we started our relationship, we were in very different places spiritually. Gabby grew up in the Christian church, so she always had that connection to God and Christianity. And I grew up kind of in the Catholic Church, not exactly, but I had proclaimed myself as an atheist around the same time that I discovered I was gay. So I feel like I had found a home in the queer community and she had a home in the church, and we were just looking for a way to bridge those two communities together. And I think Forefront really did that for us.
Yeah, and I think when we met, we were rediscovering God and rediscovering what it means to be a Christian in the world right now, and how the Bible can be translated, and how that just looks acting out, as Jesus would. And I think coupling that with a community and some place that we could learn from, and that would support us, and that we could contribute back to, was our goal. And it took us about 3 tries until we finally found Forefront.
Yeah. And Forefront has really just been so giving to us. I mean, not just us, but like everyone during this difficult and impossible year. They give everything they have. They give from food and money to
time, driving cars, and just in general, not
opportunities,
just, for COVID, but they're just really willing to extend that arm and go the extra mile when most wouldn't. And that genuine love, that genuine sacrifice, that genuine connection, I think is so special, and the reason why we give to Forefront.
And we encourage you all to give as well. You can Venmo them at ffbk-gifts, or you can set up a reoccurring gift at forefrontnyc.com/give.
Yeah, and if you are new to the church, or you want to see firsthand that extension, that sacrifice, that love, you can volunteer your time at forefrontnyc.com/volunteer. Yeah. Love you guys.
Bye.
and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord.
Hey everyone, Jonathan's video is having issues. Sorry for the delay. Back to the old tech grind. We're going to enter into a time of communion, so please grab your stuff, your materials, if you have it handy. I have, because I was unprepared to do this, white bread and a cup of water. It's milk toast, so it's actually very fancy white bread. So I'm going to just break a piece off, and if you, symbolizing essentially the breaking of the body of Jesus for all of us, and hold up your cup. And if you don't have things to eat, or you're, for whatever reason aren't partaking, just hold up your hands in a posture of prayer. And today I in particular just want to acknowledge that Jesus, we're not going to do the formal liturgy, we're just going to go pray through it. Jesus, we acknowledge that you are not just a rabbi and a teacher and someone who showed us what love was like, but you were also someone who was branded a criminal, someone who was executed by the state. And, we live in a country where the death penalty is still alive and well. And we talked about praying for Brandon Bernard earlier today, but also I think as Jonathan was probably going to say, there are still 13 more executions lined up. And so these things can feel like statistics are really far from us, but every time we take communion, we are saying we are partaking in essentially an act done by someone who was branded a criminal. We are in solidarity with those whom the state has decided deserve to die. And so let us honor their lives today. Thank you for taking communion with us today.
mercies for me every day. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. The wind is strong and the water's deep, but I'm not alone here in these open seas. Your love never fails. It's far too wide, but I never thought I'd reach the other side. Your love never fails. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. And you make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. And you make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. Your love never fails. Your love never fails.
Thanks so much for worshiping with us today. We're so grateful that you did. Sarah, thank you for your message. Uncommon kinship. I think we hit this one out of the park. Nice job, Sarah. And thanks to all of you for being a part of this uncommon kinship, for being a part of this community. So many people who have changed my life, and so many people who are changing each other's lives as we speak. So thank you, everyone. And real quick, I was going to say this during communion before my video completely cut out. Who knows what happened? It's back. But we have a God through Jesus Christ who sides more with the Brandon Bernards of the world than with anybody else, and a God who suffers with the Brandon Bernards of the world, regardless of anybody else, and a God who says, even though your life isn't what you wanted it to be, and even though you might be oppressed, and even though you might be someone who has done some awful things, this God says, I still, no matter what, forever side with you. And that's the beauty of Jesus Christ and the good news of this gospel message. And so with that, why don't we go ahead and pray and close? God, to you who does exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ask or imagine, to you, God, who just brings a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds together and then works in each one of their lives to just make profound changes. God, to you, for that reason, we give all the glory and all the honor and all the praise forever and ever. And we all say, amen. Don't forget to hang out at Kinship Cafe after service, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.